Welcome to, this is going to be the January haul, the reading recap for January, and my to-be-read list for February. It'll be a long one. Buckle up. Alright, January haul. This pile right here. First off, I should grab this from the library. Just hanging out in the library and walked by and saw it on the shelf and thought it looked interesting. It's called Words Have a Past. It is about Indigenous newspapers that were published in Indigenous schools or residential schools in Canada, and what they have to say about the words. I'm not that far into it. I'm only about 20 pages in so far. I started it last night, and it's actually a fairly weighty read. So I found, like, as I started, I had to read the sentence 3 or 4 times. And once now I'm kind of in the academic mind frame that we're picking it up just fine, and my reading speed is increased. It's an interesting one. I'm just about through the introduction of this book called Words Have a Past by Jane Griffith. A little more scholarly. Next up, library book. This is about San Francisco library fire. I believe it was 1986 that burned, I think it was about 250,000 books that they lost, and just an ode to loving library. Again, this just looked interesting. I was ordering my wife Magic 8 Ball on Amazon, and then this popped up at the same time, and I had to have something else with the Magic 8 Ball, so grab this. That was the other book. This one is by Susan Orlean, author of The Orchid Thief. I don't even know what that is, but that's the other book that she did. You'll find links to all this in the description as well. Next up is actually the Post-it note, because it's a Kindle book, so it's How to Play in Your Sandbox at Home. I've read How to Play in Your Sandbox before. I don't actually remember it, but the author reached out to me and said, hey, I loved your review. I'd love to see any feedback on How to Play in Your Sandbox at Home. And I said, sure, and I bought it on Kindle. So that's that one. And then the other one that it's actually stuck to is Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Renee Edo-Lodge. I'm probably not saying that right. One of the long-term reading things that I want to do is actually go through and read more about race, minority issues. I don't know, like, I'm a white dude, issues that I don't have to deal with. And that's actually another reason why I went and got the Words Have a Past book as well, because I'd like to do the same thing about Indigenous groups as well. So this is probably not going to be on my TBR coming up, because I'm going to probably save it. I might save it a little bit and then put like a month or 2 month together like reading list for in this vein here. Next, The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. It's just interesting. I am a person of faith, and I'm going to read this and actually find it in the TBR. I'm going to read it with another book that was recommended. So I got this at the Bookman, the local bookstore at the Bookman, and they recommended it. Adam, actually. I talked to Adam, the guy who had it on his recommend shelf, and he recommended that I read Mere Christianity with it, and I actually have a copy of it, which I just found. So I'm going to read both of those together. Next up, The Great Pretender by Susan Callahan. So this is about a charismatic doctor. You can read right here. A charismatic doctor convinced 8 healthy people to commit themselves to mental hospitals. They had to prove their sanity to be set free. Their undercover mission would change our understanding of madness forever. So this is, again, it was a new book sitting out at the local used bookstore called The Bookman, and I got it. Yeah, it just looked interesting. I'm looking for a lot more, I guess, stories like this. Like, here's a true story that happened. Here's a biography. I'm looking for more stuff like that right now. So that seemed to pique my interest. Ooh, another one. Okay, I totally got this because it said Asimov on the top. That was like the first and only thing. And I got down and it was like the top shelf, and I said, okay, I'll just take it. So this is The 7 Deadly Sins and Cardinal Virtues of Science Fiction, which is an anthology, or like it's an edited, says it on the back. 32 thrilling action-adventure stories in this giant volume are among the best of science fiction of the mid-1900s. So this was like a compilation of stories of science fiction. I like science fiction. Thought it'd be good, so that's that one. Oh, next up. I just got this last night. I had this whole thing like ready to go, and then I bought more books last night. This is Homecoming Earth. So this is, I'm not actually sure what this is. I've read this series before. It's definitely out of the series, right? I can see some of the creatures on the front, the bat-like creatures and the diggers. I don't think they call them the flyers. I don't know, but anyways, the diggers. And so I've actually read this series digitally, and I have an audiobook a couple times. This might be the entire series. It's got 2 books in it, and it is long. It's almost 700 pages. So I think this is the entire series. I'm gonna. I've read this a few times. This is more like, oh, I like that book. I'm gonna collect it. And I will put this on my read list again, and then I'll see like what else do I need in this series, because I think that might be the whole thing. It might not, because there's like I think 4 books in the original series, but that might be all of them. We'll find out when I do the research and read this. Next up, David Brooks, The Second Mountain. This is actually why I went to the bookstore last night, because they said, hey, this book you put on hold is here. And I honestly don't even remember what it's about. I just got it because I was like, oh yeah, I remember. I've heard that book. So I don't know what it's about, but The Second Mountain by David Brooks, cover's interesting. And it's definitely been on my list. As soon as they said it, I was like, oh yeah, I did want to read that book. I just don't remember what it's about. But we'll put this on the list to read at some point as well. I think for now, it'll probably get filed on the shelf though. Next up, River Queen, The Amazing Story of Tugboat Titan Lucille Johnstone. So this is a Canadian book. I actually looked back through the Canadian section a bunch and got this, and actually the last book that I'm going to talk about. And this is about Lucille Johnstone. And when was she born? Let me look this up again. Doesn't actually say. I think I read that this is like she was 25 in 1943. So she is a lady that succeeded. Lucille was 23 years old in 1948. So it's an older book. And so through like the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s, she took the tugboat thing and turned it into, what they say, like a $250 million empire or something like that. Yeah, $250 million in revenue, 1,500 employees, and Lucille Johnson, its president and CEO, is widely credited for its success. So it's a Canadian story, and it's also about a woman, and I thought that that was good, because it's far too... So being in Canada, I find it's really easy, and I go to the biography section, it's like full of US people. So even if I took the Canadian biography only section and put it over on the biography side, it's like half the size. Now, in some ways that makes sense. We have a much smaller population, but I think that being a Canadian, I should really look into learning more Canadian stories, and so that's part of that endeavor. And that'll probably be an evening read for me. Like not in the evening, but I'll read it in evenings. We'll talk about my TBR and how I organize that in a bit. And the last one that I picked up this month was Nation Maker, Sir John A. Macdonald, His Life and Times. This is volume 2, not volume 1, because they only had volume 2 in hardcover. One of the Prime Ministers of Canada, and I want to, again, just knowing more about Canadian. So some people are going to say this is terrible, because I totally learned this in school, but see the first Prime Minister? I don't actually remember. I don't know. So this is why I'm reading this, why I want to find more biographies, more Canadian biographies, more stuff like that, so that I can just know more about my own country and the history in it. That's my haul for January. Yeah, it's my haul for January. It's, not actually the end, it's the 28th, but I don't think I'm getting any more books the next couple days. So that's it. Next up, we're going to look at the TBR list, and I'll talk about how I divide that up and how I divide up my reading time. So my February TBR, I kind of divide things up into 2 sections. One is the books I read during the day. I actually put an hour aside every day for reading. So in that time, it's always books that I'm going to take notes on. I'm actually going to talk about how I take book notes. This just happens to be beside me in this book currently, but a stack of books over there as well in the next bit. So watch for that video coming up, or maybe it's already come out actually. I don't know yet, because I'm not sure how this schedule is going to go. Yeah, so I read one like that, and I read one in the evening, when maybe I'm cooking dinner, other stuff like that. So right now, that's actually, where'd it go? The book I'm reading kind of for notes to really think about is this one, Words Have a Past, by, I just said this, Jane Griffith. That's what I'm taking some notes on and kind of thinking about, and I'll probably write like a bit of, I don't know if a summary of that. I say I don't know about a summary of this, because usually I would, but I think that I probably don't know enough about everything around residential schools, newspapers, colonialism to write an accurate review as a white dude. So I will say something about it in the future, what I thought about it, and where I'm gonna, maybe probably more where it's gonna take my reading, so that I can become more educated in the future. And the other one is, I actually don't have the book with me, but I've got the slipcover. I'm reading Innovators by Walter Isaacson. That's up on my bed right now. So that's what I'm reading, in breaks, at lunch, stuff like that. That's the book I'm reading. I generally only read 2 at a time. I don't read, I see other booktubers saying they read like 5, 6, 7. I read like 2 at a time. I read one I'm really thinking about taking notes on, and I'm writing. I have my notebook with me, and I write about it. And then one that I'm just, reading more for fun. So that could be fiction, that could be a biography, that could be kind of anything, just something I'm not planning to take notes on. So I had talked about, say, River Queen earlier. Oh, this one here. Like, that's a biography about her, about Lucille Johnstone, by Polly Levy. And like that one, I'm not planning on taking notes on. If there's a good quote in there, I'll actually grab it out, but I won't actually plan to take notes on it. So that's another one like that. I'd read that in the evenings, or I'd read, say, The Pretender, The Great Pretender. Oh, it's another one. It's another candidate for my evening read. Yeah, sometimes I'll actually read a biography, even during like my reading time. It just depends on where I'm at. And during my like planned reading time where I'm going to take notes, I just may not actually take notes on it. So the rest of my TBR, I already got the first one, is Words Have a Past, and I'm currently reading The Innovators. And so the rest of it is, I'm going to read these. The library book, which I said was about like the San Francisco library fire in 86, it said. I think it was 86. Anyways, 86. I'm just going to read about that next. And then I actually have 2 Kindle books. So I've got them on the front of the God Delusion. This is how I do it. So I'll create my stack. You can see my stack over here. And so I'll create the stack up, and I'll just get down. When I get down to, I pull off the library book. The next one is Free Range Kids. And then after that is How to Play in Your Sandbox at Home. So Free Range Kids is about basically letting kids play outside. And then after that, my plan is to read Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. That is really only my books that I'm planning on taking notes for. I'm not sure what I'm going to do in like my evening fiction or my evening non-thinking reading time. That's where I'd look at, say, the 7 Deadly Sins of science fiction. Oh, this one, right? This one by, not by Asimov, but kind of by Asimov, edited by Asimov. I'd look at that. I'd look at some of the other fiction I have, some of the other biographies I have. The one on Sir John A. Macdonald. That's another one I'd look at there, or some of the other books that are just kicking around that I would want to read, but I don't. Not necessarily planning to take notes on it. So I don't actually plan those usually. I pick those up at the whim and decide like this is what I want to do, or this is what I don't want to do, and I don't worry about like picking them up beforehand. I just read at the whim. Right, I've got a few other books over there I haven't read, like The Elf Queen of Shannara is one over there that I have not read. What else haven't I read over there? Forward the Foundation. I've actually listened to that. Haven't read it yet though. Or Shadow of the Hegemon by Orson Scott Card. Haven't read it. But I've listened to it. I haven't done Earth Awakens at all. Haven't done that one at all. These are like old books that I got a while ago. What else? That might be it for now. There's a few up there. There's a few more up there in the Alvin Maker series, or in Ender's Game, in that set of books that I have up here that I've listened to. I've read on Kindle lots of times. I just haven't actually like physically held the book and read them, collecting them. So, and I think there's probably some over here that are like that too. Biographies, other stuff like that, that I haven't. Yeah. That I'm looking at an Einstein biography over there and the Steve Jobs biography, both by Walter Isaacson. Right, those are both that I'm going to read, and they would also be candidates for the evenings, not when I'm not planning on taking notes or when kids are going to interrupt me a bunch. Yeah, so that's my TBR for February. Is going to be go over it again. Words Have a Past, the library book, Free Range Kids, How to Play in Your Sandbox at Home. The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins, and Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. Next up, the reading recap for what I read in January. A reading recap for January? I think it's like 7 books. Let's see. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 7, because actually the top one I finished like just before January. But I'm going to count it because I wanted to talk about it a little bit. So the first book I'm going to talk about is iGen. I had that on Kindle. I just wanted to read it. It's about iGen, which is what? It's like 2002 to 2017 or something, 2019, as a generation. And it looked at how devices, phones in our pockets, stuff like that, have shaped that culture. I'll actually come up with a full review of that eventually, but I just reviewed Talking to Strangers, which is another book I read up here. And I just finished that. And I just did a review of that, and I just did a review of The Death of Expertise, which I read firmly in December. And I'll record those videos later, but there's some lots of overlap in those ideas. Same with You Are Awesome by Neil Pasricha, which I read in 2019 about being porcelain dolls. I think one of the big takeaways for a parent is with iGen is that wait as long as possible to give your kid a phone. And then make them read something like iGen and all the bad things that phones do to them and how it warps, especially social media messaging, warps your view of yourself. Yeah. And then as a parent too, like kids are safe, let them go and do stuff, let them hang out. Which does mean you also got to find a parent who's on board with that, who's gonna let the other kid go hang out places without parents, because kids need to do that so that they are resilient long term. Anyways, almost a counterpoint to that is Asked for the Children by Flea. Honestly, this is at the grocery store. I thought, hey, Flea, why not? I listened to some Red Hot Chili Peppers, but they're not like my favorite band or anything. It's a memoir, and it's volume 1. Like, when I got to the end, I was like, watch for volume 2. I was like, seriously? You just spent like, whatever, how many 100 pages is this? 379 pages talking about basically your drug-fueled youth. This is a counterpoint to iGen, and like your kids go do stuff because they're safe, is like, he is lucky he didn't get sexually abused by multiple men that he just stayed at their house, even though his parents didn't know them. His mom and I guess his stepdad. All the drugs he did, all the dirty needles he passed around. He's just really lucky. And if you're a big Red Hot Chili Peppers fan, you might enjoy it. I kind of went, like it was okay. I kept going like, you did what? And you're still alive after that? What? And where were your parents in any of this? And it's a little crazy, but my wife felt the same way. She wants to read volume 2. I'm kind of indifferent. She's not going to read this one again. She didn't think. So I think I'm going to actually give this away. Our librarian at my kid's school thought that was interesting. So I might just gift that to her. So I don't think I'll keep it. If I'm not going to gift it to her, then I'm going to take it down to the local used bookstore and see if I can get some credit for it. Because I like books from them, from the Bookman. Next up. This is in no particular order except the order that I found them on my shelves. Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. I finished that this week, and it was good. Like I liked it, and I feel almost though that not almost. I totally feel that there's like 4 or 5 points in the book, and they're like 2 or 150 pages of story. They illustrate it, and if you like Malcolm Gladwell's style of writing with those stories, then the book's gonna be probably right up your alley. I've read some of the other ones. I've got a few Gladwell books up here that I haven't read that I just grabbed because I had enjoyed some of them. So I thought I'll get the rest when I saw them at the local bookstore. I don't know about Talking to Strangers. That's what I'm going to say. I think there's some good strong points in it. I'm going to do a full review of it and have my recommendation in there. If you like Gladwell's writing, you'll probably like this. And there's not a good takeaway out of the book, though. But I'll get to that in the review when that comes out. So watch for the Talking to Strangers review by Malcolm Gladwell. Zig Zag Girl. Honestly, it seemed mildly interesting. It was $2. It's a used book from the library. I hate the stickers they use though. Like our library uses these stickers that like take forever to clean off. Even to get like to the ISBN on the back, I had to like clean and then wash the book to get it off, so I could scan it and put it in library thing for myself. What do I think about this? I haven't read a lot of mystery actually, and this is I just read it and thought, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. That's it. This is set just after World War II. The Magic Men. This is a Magic Men mystery. I think they actually call it something different now. A Edgar and Mephisto mystery, which is the 2 characters, something like that. Or Stevens and Mephisto, because Stevens is Edgar Stevens. Anyways, a Magic Men mystery is what it's called here, and the Magic Men are what you find out at the end of the first book, fake clandestine group that was really just trying to catch a mole. And so someone from that group comes back, and yeah, there's killing involved that tie it into the Magic Men. And they figure it out. Edgar Stevens and Mephisto, which is Max something or other. Mephisto's his Max Mephisto? I don't know. He's a magician. And the Zig Zag Girl is the old like cut a girl in half or in 3s in the zigzag box trick. So there's some magic in it. There's some intrigue in it. It wasn't bad. It wasn't like, I don't say this is like a have to read. I'll keep an eye out for the next one maybe. Like if I'm looking, hey, I need to get, what's some more fiction? I'd get the next one. But it's not like I'm like chomping at the bit and order it immediately. So we'll wait till I need something else to read, and then I might grab the next one. Decent though. Next up, High School by Sarah Quinn and Tegan Quinn. What intrigued me about this book? I don't know. Honestly, I bought it at the same time as Flea. Nothing intrigued me at first, except, they're fine, famous. Maybe I'll read this memoir. I actually thought it was a biography, but it's a memoir. What intrigued me once I got into it is we're the same age. They were born in a different month. They lived in a different chunk of Canada, but we're the same age. So flipping through some of the pictures of their yearbook, I'm like, that's totally like, I remember people in my school having that shirt because it was the thing. Um, Thinking about this, so compared to the Flea's parents, these parents were much more involved. They were totally cool with partying. My parents were never like that. And I also thought it was interesting that, and they said that a lot of their close friends were totally okay with experimenting with their sexuality. So they have both, by the end, they both come out as lesbians. And yeah, they refer to it as gay in there, but I don't remember that being the case at my school. Like, that was not okay, especially for men. So maybe it was just different for boys, for men, but it was not okay. That was like a consistent joke that everyone teased me about being gay, and I'm not. I wasn't at the time, so it bugged me then. It bugged me for a while until I said, "Hey, you know what? You can tease me as long as you need to if you're that insecure," and then that stopped it. But I was grade 9 that stopped it. So most of 1 year. But looking at that, listening to some of the music and their influences, I think this was interesting. This one I'm going to hold on to because I do like this one. And that might just be because we basically grew up in a lot of the same culture. They grew up in a bigger city. They grew up in Calgary. I grew up in Oshawa, which is just outside of Toronto. So like the music scene was not as much in there, but I was very much into music in this time too. Like I saw a number of bands early on, and I was in a few bands, and like people I was in bands with actually run recording studios in Nashville now. So that was interesting. I like this one. I'm going to keep this one because I could see myself rereading it. That might just be nostalgic though for my, because I grew up at the same time. Alvin Journeymen. This is Orson Scott Card's Alvin Maker series. I've, again, read this lots of times. I have it in Kindle. I have it on audiobook. I've listened to it multiple times. I've read it multiple times. This was at the local bookstore, and I got it because I want to have the whole set. Which I've noted the first one in this set is going to cost me like $100, and the second one's going to cost me like $100. So, but I'm getting into that with some of the old card stuff if I want it in hardcover. Same with like Speaker for the Dead and Ender's Game. Like to get those in hardcover, I'm going to have to get pay more for them. So that's fine. I love the book again. Like, nothing else to say about it. This is partway through Alvin's journey of life. I'm not sure which one's next. Alvin Maker, maybe? And then Crystal City. So I've got Crystal City up there as well. They had that at the same time. And I would like the rest of them. Seventh Son, Red Prophet, Apprentice Alvin, which would be just before this. And then, I don't know, Alvin Maker, maybe. And then Crystal City, maybe. I might have the order wrong. But that's it. And then in theory, there's another one coming out finally for like after Crystal City. And so that will be cool. I'll totally get that one when it comes out too. I've loved this series. And after discussing with my wife, can I spend $100 on a book? She's like, what book is it? And I told her what it was. And she's like, do you like it? Like, she kind of asked me some more questions. And she's like, oh, you've read it like 9 times? Yeah, it's out of the Alvin Maker. Yeah, okay. She's heard us listen to it in the car with the kids. And she's like, absolutely. You know, it's $100 for a book you love. Go for it. So, yeah, that's that one. Next up, Scarcity. This is, and the subtitle kind of says it, why having too little means so much. It's about time scarcity, but it's also about monetary scarcity and how that impacts you. So having monetary scarcity might mean you're working 2 jobs. It means you have time scarcity. And then you need the money to just pay for anything. So you can't purchase time freedom, right? So I can't purchase time slack. So we have a babysitter come in 2 nights a week, because my wife has to leave at 3 to work, and that way I can work a couple nights a week a little later. But we can purchase that time slack, right? I had a meeting last Thursday, and we purchased time slack by having that same babysitter we've had, kind of nanny babysitter we've had for years. She came and picked up my one daughter at school over here at 4:30. She drove down to the arena. She helped the kids get ready for skating, and then she actually took our car, because all the car seats are in it, back up here, parked it in the garage, put my kids to bed, and my wife drove her car back up later. And like I'll do that again next week on next Thursday, because I have another meeting in the evening. Then I'm done for months. But like I can purchase time freedom, slack in my time, because I have extra space in my finances. So again, I'll have a full review of this coming up. I'll actually record it today at some point, and it'll come out either before or after this video. I'm not sure. But Scarcity, I really like this book. There's actually a really good, I'm going to send it over to my friend who works with homeless people. There's a really good section about how to build Slack in programs you're running for people that are in scarcity. So maybe like a knowledge upgrade, a job upgrade program, and making sure that you stagger start. So maybe every 2 weeks you have a new intake. And so if someone has a problem, who knows what happens? They have a problem, they can't get to one. Maybe their childcare falls through one evening and they can't, pay anyone, so their mom can't do it, or somebody can't do it. So they jump into the next session instead. So that would be, that's what do they call that? Fault tolerance? Yeah, fault tolerance. So again, there'll be a full review. I'll talk more about this book specifically coming up, which I'll record sometime after this one today. Finally, George Lucas. My wife got me this for Christmas because she knew I like Star Wars. She thought, hey, here's an autobiography by George Lucas, but it's not actually. It's by Brian J. Jones about George Lucas. What impressed me most about this was George Lucas's continued quest to control his own future. So every penny he had, he reinvested in making sure he had control of everything. He had creative control. He had everything that he wanted control-wise so that he knew he could produce the art he wanted. That's probably the best thing. Again, this is what I'll keep. I think it's worth a reread at some point, and I enjoyed it. Yeah, I don't know what to say about it besides that. It's a good book. I will reread it. Yeah, I liked it. And I don't have any affinity to George Lucas necessarily. Like, he did some good movies. That's actually interesting. The movies he did, like Star Wars and American Graffiti and Star Wars. And then some of the other things that he kind of founded, but he also missed, right? He missed Pixar. He wanted them to create like a video editing suite, and that's it. And he missed Pixar, and then Steve Jobs bought it off him. But he did like pushing THX sound, right, at Skywalker Studio. I'm getting some of the details mixed up here. But like he re-engineered sound, and he certified theaters for sound, and we benefit from this now, even as theaters sort of collapse, but we benefit from this now, right? You can get the Dolby Atmos, your whatever THX in your house. And so the way he pushed all of that stuff was great, and the way he continually reinvested his stuff, his money in making sure he had creative control. There's actually a really interesting 20,000 Hertz episode. It's a podcast where they talk about the THX sound, that boo, or that goes deep, might go the other way. Anyways, how they made that and how they actually lost the first copy. So what we hear today is not the first copy that got approved. They came back and said, hey, can you do that again? He went, because it's like random, basically. And that was a really interesting 20,000 Hertz episode a number of months ago. So it's January 26, 2020. This is like early 2019, maybe late 2018. Really interesting one on that. So if you're into like audio, just interesting stories about audio, then 20,000 Hertz is a good one. That's 2K Hertz podcast. Good show. I love it. I'm a subscriber to that one and pay them for it. That is it for my January reading. So I read, we'll call it 7 books because I technically finished Flea the day before the other one. That is it. If you got any other questions about the books, let me know. For this whole video, there are links in the show notes below to the books, to everything. Yeah, to everything. So that you too can purchase the books that I have if you want. Yep, there are affiliate links from Amazon, from Book Depository, and some brief synopsises of the books I read are in there. So I'll link to the blog post that goes with this and have those brief synopsises as well. If you're interested, have a good one.